When my mother died, I thought the hardest part would be living in a world where she no longer existed. I was wrong. The hardest part was finding out that she had been hiding something from me, something that walked into her home like it belonged there. My mother passed quietly, peacefully, the way she lived. After the funeral, I needed time before dealing with her house, the house I grew up in, the house filled with her memories. I delayed for a month before I finally gathered the courage to drive there. But when I pulled into the driveway, something was wrong. There was a car I didn't recognize, a dark grey SUV with out-of-state plates. I felt a cold shiver, but I told myself it was probably a relative I didn't know well, maybe someone visiting, helping clean. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. I froze. Boxes, clothes, shoes, a jacket thrown over my mother's armchair, a half-eaten plate of food on the table, a pair of muddy boots by the entrance. Someone had been living there. Before I could say anything, a voice came from the hallway. "Oh, you're early." A man appeared, tall, maybe mid-40s, unshaven, wearing a white t-shirt like he owned the place. His presence felt wrong, completely out of place. "Who are you?" I demanded. He didn't look surprised. In fact, he looked annoyed. "My name's Robert," he said. "Your mother said you'd come by eventually." I felt my heart drop. "My mother didn't know you." He tilted his head. "Are you sure?" Something in his tone made anger burn through my fear. "This is my mother's house. You have no right to be here." He sighed, as if he were dealing with an inconvenience. "Look, I get you're upset, but she and I had an arrangement. We were close." That word, close, made my skin crawl. "What arrangement?" He walked to the kitchen counter and retrieved a folded document. "She rented me the guest room. I've been living here for 6 months." I stared at the paper. It was a rental agreement, handwritten, signed, with my mother's shaky, late-stage handwriting. My knees weakened. No, this couldn't be real. "You expect me to believe my mother rented out her house without telling me?" I whispered. "She said you were busy, that you two weren't close." Those words punched through me harder than anything he'd said so far. "We were close. She was my best friend. Why would she say that?" "You need to leave," I said, forcing strength into my voice. "Today," he raised his eyebrows. "I'm not going anywhere. I've got rights. This is a legal lease." "You forged her signature." "For an old lady with shaky hands. Hard to prove either way." My blood went cold. That was a threat. I stepped back, heart pounding. "Get out now, or I'll call the police." He smirked, leaning against the wall. "Go ahead. They'll tell you the same thing. If I've been living here for months, you can't just throw me out." And he was right. Tenants had rights. My mother's house, my house, was now occupied by a stranger who stood there like he dared me to fight him. I left before my shaking hands gave away just how terrified I was. As I sat in my car outside the house, I made 2 calls. The first was to a locksmith, the second was to a lawyer. The next 2 weeks were a nightmare. Robert refused every attempt to reason. He claimed my mother depended on him. He said she didn't trust me. He brought out text messages, warm, familiar, affectionate messages from my mother's phone, except they weren't from her. They were from her number. Someone had used her phone after she died. That was the moment I understood. Robert wasn't a tenant. He wasn't a friend. He was a predator. And my mother, elderly and grieving my father, had somehow let him in. Whether out of loneliness or manipulation, I'll never know. The eviction process took 37 days, 37 long days of him living in my mother's home like a parasite. He even hung curtains in the living room, brought a dog, painted one of the bedrooms. But on the final day, the day he was finally forced out by the sheriff, something happened that nearly broke me. As he packed his things, he walked past me, leaned close, and whispered, "She trusted me more than she trusted you." I didn't react. I didn't move. I didn't give him the satisfaction. But after he left, I sat on the floor in the hallway. The same hallway where my mother used to tuck my hair behind my ears. And I cried for the first time since she died. Not because of Robert, not because of the house, but because a small part of me believed him. Then I found her journal, hidden in the drawer of her bedside table. She wrote about feeling lonely, about meeting a kind stranger at the market, about how he helped her carry groceries, fix her sink, mow the lawn, how she felt guilty asking me for help because I already had too much on my plate. And there, on the last page she ever wrote, in shaky handwriting, "If something happens to me, tell Emily I love her, and don't let him stay in the house." The truth hit me like sunlight breaking through a storm. She didn't trust him. She trusted me. Enough to warn me. I kept her house. I restored it room by room. I painted the walls. I changed the curtains. I replanted her garden. And every time I walk past the doorway, I remember this. Even in her final moments, my mother still protected me from a man who thought he had already won.